Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I am Parna, host of Beyond 1 Million Fireside Chat, strategies to grow your company, irrespective of the industry you are in. In these segments, I have the privilege of speaking with entrepreneurs and experts on what it takes to scale and transform a business, as well as challenges to grow a startup to 5 million and beyond. My guest today is Joyce Sidopoulos, co-founder and chief of operations at MassRobotics. Through her leadership at MassRobotics, Joyce and her team has helped countless startups bring their cutting-edge innovations to market. In short, Joyce is a driving force in the global robotics ecosystem and an amazingly brilliant person. Joyce, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. That was a great intro. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to build this robotics ecosystem.
So, a little bit about me. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I worked for the U.S. Navy doing sonar for about a dozen years. Then I worked for a government contractor, General Dynamics, and others for the Air Force for another dozen years. And then I was ready to just switch and almost fell upon this robotics community. Back about a dozen years ago, there was a robotics community already meeting kind of regularly through the Mass Tech Leadership Council. And then in 2012 to 2014, it really started scaling and we started really noticing a lot of startups kind of emerging out of the universities, all with, robotics tech. So it was really not just me who was inspired, but the industry as the group as a whole, where a lot of industry came together and said, we need to build something that is specific around robotics that can help robotic startups with all of the resources they need. It's so much different than the software industry. You need hardware resources, you need places to prototype. So we kind of slowly started to build this plan, and it was a real community effort. There were so many contributors from the beginning. So we were really lucky that we have a vibrant community. Everyone wanted to give back, everyone wanted to help the entrepreneurs. So it was really takes a village.
It does take a village. And I don't know if you know, but I was one of the people that worked with Colin Angle and Helen Rayner when I was at iRobot, where we started building the robotics community because there was none. So it was like
Right.
literally we started small along with MTLC, and look at where
Mhm.
we've gone today. Like, yeah, I'm
I
dating
know.
myself, but oh my God, like it's a bludgeoning industry for
Yeah.
sure.
And I'll tell you, it's crazy now with, almost 100 startups here from around the world. So
Right.
this area is really known as the hub. So we've made some great traction.
Yes, you have. Yeah, and I was at CIC the other day and I saw that there's a whole crew from Japan. They were there, like, doing their presentations. It was just amazing to see.
Yeah, they're coming from all over.
Yeah, well, Boston is the innovation hub for sure.
Mhm.
So, having worked with, so many of these startups, both here and, abroad, what would you say separates the startups that can actually scale to what million versus plateauing and not being able to grow?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it always comes down to team, right? The team dynamics and everyone, the team cohesiveness, and everyone really has to be on the same page and focused. I say the ones that can really scale and push the $1 million and keep going are the ones who really, really understand the customer. So a lot of times there's great innovation happening all over Boston with the universities, but it's not always focused on a customer need. So you have to be solving a problem that a customer finds as a pain point and is willing to pay for. So, a lot of customers have a lot of challenges, but what are the ones that they're willing to pay for and how much are they willing to pay for it? So really to be focused on the challenge that you're solving and the problem that you're solving. So the ones that are solving a problem, it's easier to find the customer because they've been working with the customer to make sure that they solve that problem, right? So customer discovery, I think, is a big part of it. And that's really where we, the ones that have scaled really understand the customer.
Yeah, you're right. And it's not like if I build it, they will come. It never works that way. I've seen startups fail because oh, it's such a great product. If I build it, of course they'll come, but it doesn't work that way. So yeah, customer discovery and adoption is so critical to success. It's a really good point. So what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen some of the early stage founders make, especially as they're trying to grow? And how do you think they could avoid them?
Yeah, so I think that is a good question. Different customers want different things, and often startups are trying to solve a lot of different customer challenges at the same time. I think it's really important that they stay focused on one customer, solving their problem, providing a solution that's good, that's acceptable, and then they can start looking at others. A lot of times you'll see the startup with a really interesting technology that can solve a lot of problems in different industry sectors, but they really have to focus on one. Once you have that one adopting customer and paying customer, then you can start branching off into others. But I think it's really important to stay focused. So I think one of the mistakes is they see that, oh, this can solve a problem in athletics, but it can also be rehabilitative, and it can also be, pick one. I think another mistake that I see pretty often is free pilots. We tell our startups, do not do free pilots, because unless the customer has skin in the game, and if you're doing it for them for free, they're not going to take it as serious. And they're also, it's a little, not that they don't have skin in the game, but they're not going to see it as, you want someone who's going to be a strategic partner, who's going to want to pay for trying to solve their problems. If you're doing it for free, you're kind of cheapening your value. So you want to make sure that they value your solution and work with you to come up with a good solution. So the free pilots, that's a big no-no. And if someone's not willing to pay for a pilot, that's a red flag. I would say you need to find another customer who's kind of willing to work with you, understand what your solution is, and pay for a pilot.
I think that's a really, really great suggestion because oftentimes founders will say, "Oh, let's go find an investor,"
Right,
and that way they're just diluting their company versus really, as you said, go find a paying customer for their
right, right,
pilots.
right.
Totally,
And that can turn into a very fruitful, right, customer. And
yeah.
then they're going to have liked working with you. Then you're going to understand their pain points. So as you move forward, it's just I think it's more of a win-win. And you're not, they're paying for the pilot. So that's kind of the prototype. So they understand there's going to be some setbacks and some tweaking that you're going to have to do. So that's kind of the best scenario, really.
No, I think that's a great, great suggestion. What are some of the financial metrics you think they should be looking at, especially as they're looking to scale?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think you have to really understand your fully loaded cost. And really, you don't want to discount, because once you discount, then you have to make it up later. So that's the first kind of thing to think about. What is it really going to cost you? And it's dangerous to start discounting right off the bat. But I think a good metric to think about, and a lot of times hardware companies don't think about this, is recurring revenue. So they want to sell a product, especially if it's a consumer product, but how do you get that recurring revenue? And this is also something investors want to see. So is it through software upgrades? Is it through a rental? Like maybe it's not a sale, but it's a rental. You want to figure out how to get that recurring revenue. A lot of companies have gone to like a subscription model where the software will continue to be updated, or they'll provide data as a service for the robot that you have. So you really want to think about, that's how you can grow your revenue, right? By having this recurring all the time. So that's kind of a good metric to try to work into your business.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as you were saying, like look at the cost, in a holistic way. But now if you're looking at the market and with the tariff conversation that's happening, I wonder how it's also such an uncertain time.
Right.
And I'm sure, I don't know if you've already seen this happening, but how are they incorporating the impact of tariffs on their product and their pricing, if at all?
Yeah, I don't think they've had a lot of time to digest that yet. So we work with a lot of suppliers that are here. And so that's going to definitely trickle down. And we actually talked to a supplier today who's going to come in and talk to the startups about that. So we're constantly trying to understand the economics and bringing in professionals who can kind of help them start to think about that. Like, can you swap out something that you're getting overseas for something that's made here? And then, what are the trade offs for that?
Well, that's one of the advantages these founders working with you and the Mass Robotics community because they have all these resources that you can pull together and see what would be the best solution for the startups here. So that's
Right.
definitely awesome. And speaking of communities, how do founders in your community that you've seen over the years, they typically find their first million in revenue? Because what I've seen from my experience, they have this great product and yes, they'll do their pilot and then they'll start talking about let's go get investors for it. But it is sometimes I think important to show the traction
Right.
the market adoption, the traction to at least get to 1 million, and then see how you can scale. So what are you seeing in terms of like the patterns, if at all? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because our companies here are so diverse. We have companies making small products that can be anywhere from, a couple $1,000s to ones that are implementing their solution in a warehouse, which can be, 1 million right there. So I'd say for the small ones, you want to get big orders, right? So you actually, one of the companies who well, I don't want to bring up any names here, just got an order for 200 and it's a government order. So she has to scale quickly to make those 200 and she'll reach her million that way by selling a lot of something small, right? She has a subscription model also because she can constantly be upgrading the software to incorporate more features. But then we have one that is doing a warehousing solution, and they already have a customer that is well over 1 million. So that's one customer. So it's really tough to see trends when they're pretty and they're in all industries, right? They're in healthcare, they're in logistics and manufacturing and defense. So all of them are getting their sources and their funding in different ways. I'd say one thing to think about when you're trying to get to that 1 million, I think what investors like to see is not so much that you have 10 customers, but that you have one good customer that has actually come back to purchase a second and a third and a fourth. Because that shows that you're meeting their challenge and you're solving their problem, right? And they're coming back and you've done a good enough job that the same customer is coming back again. And I think that's pretty important rather than having, you know, 20 customers on the slide at each bought one of your units, right? I think it's better to show that one customer comes back for more.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And you kind of talked about bringing in resources or looking at customers, but what about partnerships? What would you say are key partnerships or resources the startups should be tapping into at different stages of their growth, especially in the first part, around 1 to 5 million?
Yeah. So this could be a whole 1 hour discussion on
Sure.
tapping into resources at the different stages,
Yeah.
especially when you're hiring and growing your company, you need an expert in HR and recruiting. When you're selling, you need somebody who really knows the industry. But I'd say one of the things about scaling and these are hardware companies, so they have to physically build things and it's difficult, is understanding when you're done building in-house and when you have to go to a CM. So, and it's financially very constraining when you go to a CM. It costs a lot of money. So when do you actually make that break and stop building in-house and go out of house? And so we do have resources for them here at Mass Robotics, and there's other resources across the state that can help with the manufacturing piece. Again, in an earlier stage, you have to understand that you have to design for that manufacturing. So I'd say the manufacturing resources, we have a lot in the state, and we can certainly help with that. Another one is when you're building up your pipeline, you want a salesman or a business development guy who knows the industry, not necessarily your tech to a T and can go out and talk about all the ins and outs of what you've built, but who understands the industry's challenges. So it might not be a technical person at all, right? We work with a lot of technical founders, and a lot of times those aren't the best to go out and sell to the customer. You want to get someone from the industry who knows the pain points and knows how to navigate that industry. So that's a resource that, a good business development person is a resource, especially when you're going from that 1 to 5. You really need to know someone who understands the industry.
Yeah, really good point. Are
Mm.
there any challenges the robotics founders should keep in mind other than some of the things that we talked about? Like both challenges and opportunities that they should keep in mind. And robotics, I feel, has it's kind of a two-sided thing. Some people love it because it's like, oh my God, robots are making my life easier and safer. And then there is another side that says, oh, robots are taking over my jobs. But how do we balance it, and what advice do you give them, especially about market opportunities?
Yeah, so I would say, okay, always go after the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs that nobody wants. And I feel robotics is really covering a lot of that with agriculture and with construction, right? And defense and manufacturing. There's a worker shortage. And some of our companies are going to be closing down if they can't automate. So I think people are finally starting to realize we are seeing adoption much better and growing. I think one thing to really talk to founders about, especially in the hardware space, is that whatever time you think it's going to take for you to reach what you're going to call success or your first sale, you got to times that by 2 or 3. I guess you don't understand it until you're in it. We've had companies here for 4 and 5 years. They're now starting to scale. So we're just at that tipping point where we have a lot of companies that have gotten a lot of traction, but we've been open for 8 years. So it does take a long time. It takes a long time to build hardware, test hardware. So I would say, for advice, don't be discouraged. It does take a long time. And the nice thing about being in an ecosystem like this is there's so much support. There's so many people who have scaled that come back and want to give back to the community. So we have Colin Engel come in here and work with our startups and kind of advise them. We have Carl Vaus coming tonight for a session with our startups. So it's really a unique community we have here. So I would say it does take a long time. Don't get discouraged and stay focused. Those are kind of like the main, I would say, key advice that we give to most of our startups.
No, that those are all really good points. But before we wrap up, what is the one tip that you would give to an entrepreneur who is looking to grow their startup from 1 to 5 million?
So one tip,
One tip.
but I would say that the one of the main tips is to stay focused.
Sure.
It's so easy to want to pivot and do a million things, but really you have to focus on that first customer and make it right. That's the biggest thing. And I would say, the second thing is to leverage the people that are in the industry that you're selling into as a business development kind of person. It's a unique sales process because robotics is new. So people who know the industry know what the pain points are. So those are kind of my main: stay focused, leverage people in the industry, use the resources out there. And I would say join the community because there's so many people who want to help.
No, you're absolutely right. And yeah, it's I think being a founder sometimes is also really scary because they don't want to ask for help. If they
Right.
do, they'll say, oh, they feel like, oh, don't I know how to build a product? But like you said, it takes a community and all kinds of expertise to actually not just build a product, but the go to market and so on. It's a really, really good tip that you've given. Anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap?
I'd say we're really lucky to have people like you who are in the community who give back and advise people on the marketing side of it and the branding. That's also very important. And that does come when you're going from 1 to 5 million, right? You have to build a brand out there. I feel so fortunate to be in this community and, with everyone who wants to give back and really help the startups. It's like a family here.
I would support that completely. It is a family for sure. Joyce, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. I know a lot of the founders who hear you will absolutely find your insights super helpful. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me and all you do for the community, Parna.
Thank-
Appreciate it.
That's so kind of you.